In a land of 1,000 gods, one man dared to follow the light of a single sun. His vision would build a city and tear an empire apart.
I will not bow to idols of stone.
The Aten lives in the sky.
He was not a conqueror, not a warrior. He was a believer. And belief can be dangerous.
Egypt was built on gods. Belief kept the world in balance. Until one man decided the gods were wrong.
Right. He believed there was only one truth, one God, and no place for the rest.
Temples were closed. Names were erased. Faith was declared illegal.
People lost their gods, their work, and their sense of safety.
No, whatever could I know? He built a city for his god, but when he died, the city was abandoned.
While he prayed, the empire weakened, and enemies moved closer. That is how empires fall.
His name was erased, his memory destroyed, as if he never lived.
Was he a visionary, or a fanatic, ahead of his time, or a warning? That's the premise.
This is not just history. This is the story of belief, power, and a man who tried to change God.
Before Akhenaten came to power, Egypt was a land of stability. People believed the world made sense. Life followed patterns, and those patterns brought comfort. The sun rose every day. The Nile flooded every year. Crops grew, families survived, and traditions continued. This rhythm was everything to the Egyptian people. Because rhythm meant order, and order meant safety, the Nile River was the heart of this system. When it flooded, it left behind fertile soil. Farmers planted seeds, and food was produced for the entire society. When the floods were good, people believed the gods were pleased. When floods failed, people feared the gods were angry. Nature and belief were inseparable. Religion was not something Egyptians practiced once a week. It shaped every part of life. From birth to death, gods were present. Homes had small shrines. Villages had local temples, and cities were dominated by massive religious complexes. These were not only places of prayer, they were economic centers, storing grain, employing workers, and distributing food during hard times. Priests held great power, not because they ruled armies, but because they controlled access to the gods. They performed rituals, interpreted signs, and told people what the gods desired. For common Egyptians, this system made sense. If something went wrong, there was a god responsible and a ritual that could fix it. The Egyptians believed in many gods, and this diversity was not seen as a weakness. Different gods ruled different forces of nature and human life. Osiris ruled the afterlife. Isis protected families. Ra controlled the sun. Ammon represented hidden power, and countless local gods guarded towns, fields, and homes. No single god replaced the others. Balance was key dot at the center of all this. Stood the Pharaoh. He was not only a political leader, he was a sacred figure. The Pharaoh was believed to maintain Mat, the cosmic balance of truth and order. If he performed his duties correctly, Egypt would prosper. If he failed, chaos could follow. This belief placed enormous pressure on the ruler, but it also unified the population. For ordinary people, faith was deeply emotional. It was connected to fear of drought, fear of disease, fear of death, and fear of the unknown. Gods were protectors, but also judges. People prayed not out of philosophy, but out of survival. They wanted their children to live, their crops to grow, and their souls to reach the afterlife. In this world, change was slow. Traditions lasted generations. New ideas were absorbed carefully, not forced. Stability mattered more than innovation. Egypt had survived for centuries because it respected continuity. Most rulers understood this and ruled within the system. This is the world Akhenaten was born into. He was born with the name Amenhotep IV, a name that honored the god Amen, one of the most powerful gods in Egypt. Even before he spoke his first words, his identity was tied to religion. His birth was celebrated not just as a royal event, but as a sacred moment. His father, Amenhotep III, was one of Egypt's most successful rulers. During his reign, Egypt was wealthy, peaceful, and respected across the ancient world. Gold flowed from Nubia. Trade connected Egypt to distant lands, and foreign kings sent gifts and letters seeking friendship. Temples grew larger, monuments were built, and festivals filled the calendar. For many Egyptians, this period felt like perfection. There was no visible reason to change anything. The system worked. As a child growing up in the royal court, Amenhotep IV would have seen wealth, power, and ceremony every day. He would have watched priests perform rituals, officials manage affairs, and artists carve images of gods and kings. Yet even in this environment, something about him felt different. Unlike many pharaohs, he did not present himself as a warrior. In his early years, he did not emphasize strength or conquest. Instead, his later actions suggest he was introspective, observant, and deeply focused on ideas. Some historians believe he felt overwhelmed by the complexity of Egypt's religious system, while others think he sought simplicity in a world full of ritual. At some point, likely during his youth, a belief began to form in his mind. A belief that Egypt was wrong, not slightly mistaken, but fundamentally mistaken. He began to see the many gods not as protectors, but as distractions. He became focused on the sun, not as a god with human qualities, but as a force, light that touched everyone equally, energy that made life possible. The sun did not hide in temples. It rose for all to see. To Akhenaten, this felt like truth. This belief did not emerge overnight. At first, it existed quietly. Aten, the solar disk, had always been part of Egyptian belief. Other pharaohs had honored the sun, but Akhenaten's interpretation was different. He did not see Aten as one god among many. He saw Aten as the only necessary force. When Amenhotep IV became pharaoh, few people noticed immediate change. Rituals continued, temples remained open, the system appeared intact, but slowly. Subtle shifts began to appear. Aten received more attention. Other gods received less. Akhenaten began to withdraw support from powerful temples, especially those dedicated to Amen. This was not just religious, it was political. The priesthood of Amen had grown extremely wealthy and influential. By weakening them, Akhenaten strengthened his own authority. Asterisk eventually, he made a decision that shocked Egypt. He changed his name. Amenhotep IV became Akhenaten, meaning effective for Aten. This was not symbolic. It was a declaration. The pharaoh had chosen a new god, and this god would stand above all others. For the people of Egypt, this was deeply unsettling. Names mattered. Names carried power. By rejecting Amen, Akhenaten rejected centuries of tradition. He was no longer maintaining balance. He was redefining it. At this moment, Egypt stood at a crossroads. Most people did not yet understand what was coming, but the foundation of the old world had begun to crack. Akhenaten believed he was correcting a mistake. He believed he was restoring truth. What he did not yet realize was how deeply the old system was woven into the lives, fears, and identities of his people, and this misunderstanding would change everything. Akhenaten was not a normal ruler, even by ancient standards. He did not think like most kings, and he did not act like them either. While other pharaohs focused on power, armies, and expansion, Akhenaten focused on ideas, meaning, and belief. This difference defined his life, and it also defined his failure. From a young age, Akhenaten appeared inward-looking. He grew up surrounded by wealth, ceremony, and tradition, yet he did not fully embrace them. The royal court was loud and busy, filled with priests, officials, soldiers, and servants. But Akhenaten seemed distant from this world. He observed more than he participated. Many historians believe he was deeply sensitive. Others believe he was isolated. Some suggest he felt overwhelmed by the rigid expectations placed on a divine king. Whatever the reason, Akhenaten did not fit comfortably into the role Egypt had prepared for him. He was not trained as a warrior in the way earlier pharaohs had been. Military glory did not excite him. He did not dream of conquest or expansion. Instead, he questioned the purpose of power itself. This made him unusual, but it also made him unprepared for the realities of ruling an empire. Akhenaten believed ideas mattered more than systems. He believed truth mattered more than tradition. This belief shaped every decision he made. Once he became convinced that Aten was the true source of life, he stopped seeing other perspectives. To him, disagreement did not mean difference of opinion. It meant resistance to truth. This is where Akhenaten's strength became his weakness. He had clarity, but he lacked flexibility. He had conviction, but he lacked empathy. He believed people would understand his vision if it was simply revealed to them. He underestimated how deeply people depended on familiar beliefs. Akhenaten did not try to slowly guide society toward change. He did not build bridges between old beliefs and new ones. Instead, he replaced one system with another, expecting obedience to follow naturally. For a ruler, this was a dangerous assumption. Another important influence in Akhenaten's life was Nefertiti. She was not just his wife, she was his partner in belief. In art and inscriptions, she appears almost equal to him, standing beside him, worshipping Aten, and even performing rituals usually reserved for kings. This suggests that Akhenaten trusted her deeply. Nefertiti likely reinforced his ideas. Together, they created a small world within the larger empire, a world centered on Aten, family, and devotion. This inner circle became Akhenaten's emotional shelter, but it also increased his isolation from reality. Akhenaten surrounded himself with supporters who shared his vision. Priests of Aten, loyal officials, and artists who embraced the new style were welcomed. Critics, doubters, and traditionalists were pushed away. Over time, Akhenaten stopped hearing voices that challenged him. This isolation strengthened his certainty. When no one questions you, belief becomes absolute. Akhenaten began to see himself not just as a ruler, but as the chosen interpreter of divine truth. Only he could understand Aten fully. Only he could guide humanity correctly. This belief placed enormous power in his hands, but it also placed enormous responsibility on his shoulders. A responsibility he was not equipped to manage. Akhenaten's view of leadership was spiritual, not practical. He believed that if belief was corrected, everything else would fall into place. He assumed that economic stability, political order, and military strength would naturally follow. Religious truth, history shows that this assumption was wrong. While Akhenaten focused on worship, administration suffered. Decisions were delayed. Officials waited for guidance that never came. Systems that required constant attention began to weaken. An empire cannot run on belief alone. Akhenaten also misunderstood the emotional role of religion. For common people, gods were not abstract forces. They were personal protectors. They listened, punished, forgave, and comforted. Aten, by contrast, felt distant. A glowing disk in the sky could not replace a god who lived inside the home. Akhenaten did not see this gap. To him, simplicity was clarity. To the people, simplicity felt empty. This disconnect created silent resistance. Some historians have questioned Akhenaten's mental health. They point to his extreme focus, his lack of compromise, and his isolation. Others argue he was simply an idealist born into the wrong system. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Akhenaten was not insane. He was coherent, focused, and purposeful. But he was rigid. Once he committed to an idea, he could not let it go. He believed history would prove him right, even if the present rejected him. This made him dangerous, not because he was cruel, but because he was certain. Certainty without balance is one of the most destructive forces in leadership. Akhenaten also redefined what it meant to be Pharaoh. He no longer presented himself primarily as a god-king. Instead, he appeared as a human figure, loving father, and devoted servant of Aten. This was revolutionary. It made the ruler feel closer to the people, but it also weakened the authority of the throne. When a ruler steps down from divine distance, he must replace it with strong institutions. Akhenaten did not do this. He removed one source of authority without building another. This created confusion. Was the Pharaoh a god, a servant, or a teacher? No one was sure. Ambiguity at the top creates instability below. Akhenaten believed he was freeing Egypt from falsehood. In reality, he was removing the psychological support system that held society together. People were not ready for such freedom. They were not prepared to live without familiar gods. Despite this, Akhenaten remained convinced he was right. He believed suffering was temporary. He believed resistance would fade. He believed future generations would understand. This belief kept him moving forward, even as cracks formed around him. Akhenaten's tragedy is not that he dreamed too big. It is that he dreamed alone. He did not bring his people with him. He assumed truth was enough. History would soon prove that belief, without connection, cannot sustain a civilization. Akhenaten's revolution did not stay inside temples. It spread into daily life, into homes, fields, and markets. At first, many people did not understand what was happening. They heard new prayers, saw new symbols, and noticed old rituals disappearing. But life continued, at least for a while. Then the changes became impossible to ignore. Temples began to close, not all at once, but steadily. These were not just religious buildings. They were the backbone of the economy. Temples stored grain, paid workers, organized farming, and supported entire communities. When they closed, people lost more than faith. They lost security. Priests lost their positions. Scribes lost their work. Craftsmen who carved statues and painted gods were suddenly unnecessary. Families that had depended on temple wages for generations found themselves without income. Akhenaten did not create a replacement system. He removed the old one and expected society to adjust for common people. This was frightening. Religion had always offered answers. If a child became sick, a god could be blamed or begged. If crops failed, a ritual could be performed. Now those familiar gods were declared meaningless. Aten offered no personal rituals, no local presence, no comforting stories. It was only light in the sky. This created a deep sense of loss. People felt abandoned, not only by their gods, but by their ruler. Akhenaten believed he was freeing people from superstition. In reality, he removed the emotional support that helped them survive fear and uncertainty, while life inside Egypt became unstable. The situation outside Egypt grew worse. Egypt was not just a kingdom, it was an empire. It controlled distant territories through diplomacy, gifts, and military strength. This system required constant attention. Governors needed support. Allies needed reassurance. Enemies needed to be watched. During Akhenaten's reign, this attention disappeared. Foreign rulers sent letters asking for help. Some begged for soldiers. Others warned of growing threats. These letters still exist today. Known as the Amarna letters, they reveal a clear pattern. Egypt was being challenged, and no one was responding. Cities loyal to Egypt were attacked. Trade routes weakened. Rivals gained confidence. Governors felt abandoned. Soldiers waited for orders that never came. Akhenaten was aware of these problems, but they were not his priority. His focus remained on Aten and religious reform. Akhenaten believed that spiritual truth would protect Egypt. He believed that once the gods were corrected, stability would return naturally. But belief alone cannot defend borders. Armies require leadership, resources, and attention. Egypt's military strength slowly eroded at home. Resistance grew quietly. People did not openly rebel. Egypt was not a society that encouraged protest. Instead, people returned to old practices in secret. They whispered old prayers. They kept small idols hidden inside their homes. Publicly, they obeyed. Privately, they resisted. Akhenaten responded by tightening control. Names of old gods were erased from monuments. Statues were destroyed. This was deeply traumatic for Egyptians. Erasing a name meant erasing existence. By removing the gods from stone, Akhenaten symbolically removed them from memory. This created fear, not loyalty. People obeyed because they had to, not because they believed. This kind of obedience is fragile. It holds only as long as power remains strong. Despite the suffering, there were positive aspects to Akhenaten's revolution. He challenged corruption. The priesthood of Ammon had grown extremely wealthy and powerful. Akhenaten reduced their influence and questioned their authority. For a moment, Egypt imagined a society without religious monopolies. His artistic reforms also changed how people saw themselves. Art became more human. Families were shown with affection. Children were depicted as playful and real. This was a rare moment of emotional honesty in ancient royal imagery. Akhenaten also imagined a god that belonged to everyone. Aten was not tied to one city or one group. In theory, this created equality. No priest stood between people and the divine. This idea was far ahead of its time. Where good intentions do not erase consequences, Akhenaten failed to manage the transition. He underestimated how deeply belief was connected to survival. He believed people could let go of tradition easily. They could not as problems grew. Akhenaten withdrew further into his inner world. He focused more on rituals, hymns, and symbolic acts. The empire continued to weaken. Officials hesitated, systems slowed. Trust disappeared by the end of his reign. Egypt was divided, not openly, but emotionally. The people followed one path in public and another in private. The state appeared unified, but it was hollow. Akhenaten had changed everything. Religion, art, and identity were no longer the same. But the cost was high. Egypt was weaker, poorer, and less secure than before. His revolution had shaken the foundations of civilization, but it had not built something strong enough to replace them. Akhenaten ruled for about 17 years, and then his story ended quietly. There was no great victory at the end of his life, no celebration of his vision, no moment where Egypt fully accepted his ideas. His death did not bring relief or sorrow. It brought uncertainty. After Akhenaten died, the city of Akhenaten began. Too empty, The capital he had built in the desert, filled with light and open temples, was slowly abandoned. Officials left first, then workers, then families. Houses were left unfinished. Temples stood silent. The desert reclaimed the city faster than anyone expected. This abandonment was symbolic. Akhenaten existed only because of Akhenaten's belief. Without him, it had no purpose. The people did not miss it. They returned to familiar cities, familiar gods, and familiar rituals. Stability mattered more than ideology. What followed was not simple change. It was deliberate erasure. Akhenaten's name was removed from monuments. His images were destroyed. Official records skipped his reign entirely. Future generations would not read his name among the kings of Egypt. In ancient Egypt, erasing a name was the worst punishment possible. It meant denying a person their afterlife. It meant they would not be remembered. Akhenaten's enemies wanted more than revenge. They wanted to undo his existence. The old gods returned quickly. Temples to Amun were reopened. Priests regained power. Rituals resumed. The system that Akhenaten had tried to destroy snapped back into place, almost as if it had been waiting. Even Akhenaten's own son rejected him. Tutankhaten changed his name to Tutankhamun, honoring the god Amun. This was a public statement. The royal family itself had abandoned Aten. The revolution was officially over. From the perspective of his time, Akhenaten was a failure. His religion did not survive. His city collapsed. His reforms were reversed. Egypt returned to the old ways stronger than before, as if determined to forget him. But history is not written only by contemporaries. It is written by distance, and with distance, Akhenaten becomes more complicated. Akhenaten attempted something no ruler had done before. He tried to center an entire civilization around a single universal force. He imagined a god that did not belong to priests, cities, or statues. A god that shone on everyone equally. Some historians see him as the first monotheist. Others reject this idea, arguing that Aten worship was still centered on the pharaoh, not on personal faith. Both views reveal something important. Akhenaten's system was not religion for the people. It was religion through the ruler. This was one of his greatest flaws. He removed the gods, but replaced them with himself as the only interpreter of truth. Power and belief became inseparable. When belief depends on one person, it cannot survive that person. Akhenaten was sincere. There is little evidence that he acted out of greed or cruelty. He believed deeply in his vision. He was willing to risk everything for it. In this sense, he was brave. But sincerity is not enough to govern a society. Good intentions do not protect borders. Pure ideas do not feed families. Vision without compromise creates suffering. Akhenaten failed because he misunderstood people. He believed truth could be imposed. He believed fear would disappear once gods were removed. He believed society could be rebuilt quickly around an idea. He was wrong. People do not abandon identity easily. Belief is emotional. It is tied to memory, fear, and hope. Akhenaten tried to move faster than human nature allowed. Yet it would also be wrong to dismiss him entirely. His reign changed Egyptian art forever. His focus on family, emotion, and humanity left a permanent mark. His challenge to priestly power exposed corruption. His ideas forced Egypt to confront questions it had never asked. Akhenaten reminds us that history does not move only through success. It moves through experiments, through mistakes, through people who dare to imagine something different. His world did not survive him. His ideas were erased. But the questions he raised never fully disappeared. Can belief be universal? Can truth belong to everyone? Can power reshape faith? These questions still matter. Akhenaten stands as a warning and a lesson. A warning about absolute certainty. A lesson about the cost of change without compassion. He was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was a man who tried to rewrite the world and discovered how fragile civilizations truly are.